Okay, this custom-made image for you all. I don't know if the Hitler mustache is a bridge too far here, but um, this lecture is on chapter 23 of our book, World War II, and it will take several parts. It's a long one. I'm going to try to just get it done in one crack here. The first part is going to look at ideology, so what's happening in the United States very briefly, and then the development of fascism abroad in Italy and Germany, obviously, and then what's going on in Japan. It's doing its own thing, and then I'll talk about the war itself in Europe, which again was optional reading for you all. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on that to supplement the information if you didn't read it all. And then I'll shift to the war on the home front and the various things that are happening, the developments to win the war, but also some not so nice things that are happening domestically with respect to race, Japanese internment, obviously, and then the aftermath of the war, Holocaust, uh, atomic bomb, all that kind of stuff. So it's a big one. We'll see. We'll see how I do. Probably not good. We'll see. We'll see. It's gonna be long. Okay, let's do it. World War II. In the background, you have, right, of course, as we've seen time and time again, women at work. This is an image from a plant building bombers for the war. As a tail, these are tail gun sections, so the unenviable role of being in a glass tube at the back of a plane and trying to shoot any fighter planes that are kind of intercepting your bombing run. Not a great spot to be. But they're building these, right? That because of the shift in production from cars to military equipment, all this stuff is being built, and this is one of the reasons why the United States is so pivotal in winning World War II. World War One, the United States isn't there for that long. Um, kind of is, a minor factor really in what was a long and grueling war. World War II, the United States is a major factor, and largely because of the massive acceleration in production. They can't make that stuff in Europe, right? Because it's at war. So who else is going to make all this stuff? The United States really plays a central role. Okay, so let's back up and look at foreign policy here. What's going on in the United States on the eve of war, as they say. This is a time period of isolationism, but remember, isolationism doesn't mean isolation, right? So while the United States is isolationist, it's in all kinds of, it's intervening in Latin American policy. It is intervening in what Japan can and cannot do in the Pacific, with the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary. So all of that kind of stuff. So FDR comes to power and he changes the tone a little bit. He recognizes the USSR in 1933. This is new. The United States had been against the Soviet Union from the really literal beginning. Woodrow Wilson supporting the whites in the I don't mean white people, but like the Russian Civil War has two sides: the Reds and the Whites. The Whites are the Royalists, and Wilson supported them. So this is the first recognition of the USSR. Similarly, in 1933, the Good Neighbor policy is initiated, which is, again, a kind of mea culpa on the part of the United States, saying we have been intervening in Latin American affairs to the detriment of the Latin American people. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to promote trade agreements that are mutually beneficial, as opposed to hierarchical, one-sided kind of banana republic type stuff. So that is, and again, Mexico expropriates some oil reserves that are held by American oil interests, and the leaders of the oil companies want the United States to intervene. Roosevelt says, "Hey, tough luck, get it back yourself." So a less interventionist policy Stimson Doctrine, however, in the Pacific, there's a holdover from the Hoover administration, is a kind of a check on Japanese expansion, not recognizing the Japanese, the gains that are achieved by force. So mainly Manchuria. Remember, Korea was just part of Japan. So this is Manchuria and then other places that Japan is taking over by force. Still, nonetheless, most Americans don't want to get involved in Asia or in Europe. Again, remember, the United States is very much involved, right? With trying to open up markets in Asia, cultural ties to Europe, immigration from Europe. So it's kind of a misnomer, right, to think of it. It is isolationist, but it's not a country in isolation. What's happening domestically here? A couple different visions. This is a cartoon from the time period on the left-hand side. I have this right here, yeah. On the left-hand side, the America First Committee, the Nazi transmission belt. This was a common criticism of the America First Committee. This was as your book says, isolationist. Not so radical as the German American Bund, who we saw that brief documentary short on in class, but still fairly extreme, isolationist, stay out of Europe's issues. Now, again, remember, as Germany is militarizing and threatening their neighbors, to say you're going to stay out of European affairs is a kind of vote for Germany, right? So no military aid to Europe. Charles Lindbergh is the most famous America First person. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have a still from Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, a very famous Frank Capra movie. And Capra, like others, are representative of the Popular Front. The Popular Front is the left-wing version, like the left-wing, like, not like well done radical, but like medium well. Because there are still communists and socialists. And the Popular Front was an anti-fascist organization that was multiracial, it was northern, it was southern, and it is largely progressives, New Deal Democrats, and the Communist Party does eventually it actually backs the Popular Front, as opposed to the CPUSA had always been very anti-Roosevelt, anti-New Deal, because they, is bourgeois, whatever, capitalist, something or other, kind of critique. They recognizing the threat of fascism, they also join with this kind of coalition of various left-leaning groups. John Steinbeck, Woody Guthrie, Frank Capra, Dorothea Lange, a lot of famous people were Popular Front spokespeople. Okay, so what's this all about? Let's get down to the brass tacks here. Fascism. In Europe, the rise of fascism. A fascio is a bundle. So you have here like a fascio is like a bundle of reeds or wood. It's a kind of symbol of, the Romans, it was a symbol of ancient Rome. It's a symbol of the French Revolution. There's a symbol in the American Revolution, all being inspired by Roman republicanism, right? Well, once we get to the 1920s, that Roman republicanism is used as a symbol of a more austere form of republicanism, a more selfless and self-sacrificing form of republicanism that is far closer to Roman Empire than the Roman Republic, and that is fascism. It is authoritarian, so you need a singular leader. Authoritarian form of government that places the good of the nation above all else. So this is the point. You sacrifice for the good of the nation. Your own needs are subservient or subordinate. Your rights are subordinate. It is all about the greater good of the nation. And that's the imagery of the fascio, right? That out of all of this, these individual elements coming together, you become something stronger than yourself. Fascists envision an aggressive state ruled by a dictator. That's kind of the deal. You don't have fascism without a strong man, and it's always a man, right? I can't really think of a fascist government that's female-led, largely because, as I'll say in a second, patriarchy is a big part of this. They make the decisions, they make the calls, everyone else just follows along for the good of the state. Fascist governments closely align with large industries. So the issue, of course, being communism is state ownership of industry for, right, so redistribution of wealth for the good of the working class, as the theory goes. Laissez-faire capitalism is the state is here and business is here, and business gets to do its own thing, and the state is kind of off to the side, minimally regulating the economy. Fascism is like communism in the sense that it's the state and industry together, but it's for the enrichment of the state itself. Remember, the workers, individuals are subordinating their personal interests to the good of the state, where the theory goes in communism, it's the opposite way around, right? That the workers, you get free health care and education, you go to school, all of the point of industry is to enrich, right, the workers. Uses patriarchy. Again, fascism is like a family with a totalitarian father, right? That makes all of the calls, all of the rules, is authoritarian, dominates the mother, dominates the children, but knows what's best, right, for everyone in the family. Well, that's what we have here with fascism. It is obviously an ideology that discourages individuality, that discourages your own interests, and it is. I mean, this is a new edition this year. I don't know if the sound is maybe a bit gratuitous, but it's for bootlickers, right? I mean, let's be frank here. Fascism is for followers, right? There's only one Il Duce. There's only one Führer. Everyone else is a follower. Everyone else obeys orders. So that's what you get. You get it in the 1920s in Italy. You get it in the 1930s, obviously in Germany. It's an ideology that comes out of people's real desire for stability, right? So like, well, I'm kind of certainly mocking the ideology, and I will throughout this presentation. That's not enough, right? You have to understand where it comes from. And it comes from a space of Weimar Germany is a mess. 1920s Italy also has all kinds of economic issues, social issues, and this ideology says we have the answers, right? We can make you feel right, strong again, great again, right? Restore the nation, and people get down for that. Right, in a time of crisis, economic crisis, social crisis, people get down with that, and they're more willing to follow if they think the person they're following has the answers, right? And that's where we get these kind of ideologies emerging. Okay, in Italy, I have censored this image, which actually has Mussolini and his family strung up in the Piazzale Loreto by their feet. So I've edited it with a meme format that was popular last year, and you get hopefully the joke here. It does. This is late Mussolini, right? This is not his early career. Early career in the 1920s, he leads a march on Rome, basically seizes power. Keep in mind, look at these dates. This is way before Germany. So Hitler is in, I think he goes to jail in 22. I can move forward to the next slide. I might have it. But Hitler's nothing. Hitler's nobody. In 1922, fascism, that's why it's from a faccio, it emerges in Italy first. He declares himself the leader, Il Duce. It's a totalitarian state. And he's a very gifted speaker. I mean, people mock the kind of like gesticulating or whatever, but he's a very good speaker. He is politically savvy, but he also uses violence, threats of violence, to consolidate power and become the singular totalitarian that he is. Any fascist needs to have, right, some kind of military intervention to make the nation right? Great. And for Mussolini, this is Italy. They tried it once in the late 19th century. They're going to try it again in 35. Ethiopia being the only independent nation in Africa, right? Scramble for Africa. The rest has been carved up. So Italy has a particular target aimed at, or Ethiopia has a target that Italy is going to aim at. They don't really do that well. I mean, Germany in the end comes in and kind of bails them out, but that's their kind of little campaign to restore, right, the Roman kind of empire. Um, Initially, this is not me trying to cape for Mussolini, but initially the whole scientific racism, eugenicist stuff is not part of Mussolini's platform. But as Hitler rises to power and becomes the kind of like suddenly the alpha in this kind of relationship, Mussolini follows along with the Manifesto on Race, which is effectively the German Nuremberg laws for Italy, right? Anti-Semitic, racial purity stuff um, uh, uh, for the Italian scene. Okay, little Adolf. Little Adolf here down in on the bottom here. There's no better way to uh, de-emphasize the man Adolf Hitler than use this preposterous photo of him. So yeah, so the he goes to jail 1923. This is a year after Mussolini comes to power. Tries to overthrow the Weimar government with the help of the National Socialist Party. It's not socialism. It's fascism. So again, there's people on the internet who don't know what they're talking about, um, uh, who say that they're not the same thing, right? And it's just like it's factual. It's like empirical. It's not even debatable. It's empirical fact. Hitler's not a socialist. He's a fascist. National Socialism, just because it has newsflash, the honor code isn't written in code. Like it's not a bunch of zeros and ones. Yeah, it has, but it has the same word in it, man. It has the same word in it. It's also not this. The National Socialist Party is not a big party where they're like all hanging out or whatever at like Hitler's at the Eagle's Nest or something. So that's not even a thing. It's not a thing. He goes to jail. He writes Mein Kampf, My Struggle, in jail, gets out, and he's back on the scene. Going to rebuild the German economy. He has his opponents arrested. He consolidates power, takes on the title of Fuhrer. Bad stuff will happen. Introduces a bunch of fascist policies, wage controls. Again, your personal interest, the interest of the worker, is secondary to the good of the nation. Massive public works, the Autobahn, right? German freeway system is a Nazi era thing. Again, people don't go like, oh, well, I mean, but, on the one hand, World War II, Hitler stuff, but the Autobahn, so you gotta, no, that's not a thing, right? Like it's an it's a across the board bad regime, but they did stuff. They certainly did stuff. And again, this is Nazi Germany trying to respond to an economic crisis. How do you respond? You put people to work. You build a national highway system. Mussolini made the trains run on time, right? They famously say. So all of this stuff is about getting your country out of what was a global depression in the 1930s. Mass rallies, the famous, right, Cathedral of Light, all of that Albert Speer kind of stuff. Lots and lots and lots of spending on the military. I think at one point it's like 2/3 of the budget. It's like an insane amount of the budget on military spending. Fascist culture, obviously most infamous in its anti-Semitism. Any fascist needs an enemy within. So just like for Mussolini, you need to invade Ethiopia, you need something outside, right, of the country to galvanize, unify the nation. It also helps to have an enemy within, some kind of something that doesn't belong that you need to get rid of. Classic anti-Semitism for the Nazis. That's what it is. Kristallnacht, 1938, as I mentioned, is the moment where the kind of historians say the Holocaust kind of begins, where anti-Jewish violence is no longer like an unwritten and tolerated thing, but kind of the order of the day. Japan's a little different. Not exactly kind of fascist. It's more just kind of like a military kind of dictatorship going on. This is a process long, long in the making. It is a mix of many things. If you remember from AP World or Modern World, the Meiji Restoration, 1860s on, is Japan trying to catch up to the West, saying we don't want to be colonized like these other nations. We're going to industrialize. Meiji Restoration, Bushido, samurai myth making. From the Meiji on, and especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, this kind of samurai stories become really central, very, very popular in Japanese literature, in a way that is disproportionate to the actual significance, right, of kind of samurai culture. So it becomes this really central thing. It's very warrior-like. It's about honor, and then kind of Japan's own version of racism. Japan saying just because they as they're industrializing like the West and militarizing, they say that they are kind of like the Westerners of Asia. They're like the white people of the Pacific. They think they're racially superior, and that informs their imperial ambitions. Hideki Tojo is the guy who's in charge during this time period, right before Pearl Harbor, and then on through the war. So Tojo is kind of takes the reins of the Japanese military and the empire right before World War II starts, and then sees it through until he's executed after the war. They have a lot of different pretenses for expansion. Manchurian incident is kind of a fake. Japanese soldiers are killed. It happens in Manchuria. It's a reason for going in, even though Japan did it themselves to them. It's like a false flag, as people say, but like a real one, not a fake one. Anti-Comintern Pact. So again, this is Japan saying, the real problem is communism. Isn't it amazing how communism is used as a foil to propel Franco, Mussolini, Hitler, Tojo to power, because people are more afraid of the Soviet Union. And again, in 1936, Soviet Union 1955 is something to be kind of afraid of. But in 1931, 1936, not as much. And then the last kind of reasoning here is anti-imperialism. That it's actually Japan is liberating these people, right? In Indochina, for example, Southeast Asia, right? Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, all of these places are being liberated. Formosa, or what is now Taiwan, being liberated by the Japanese. And then, right, like they're the new empire. Briefly here, Spanish Civil War is kind of a trial run for these various ideologies clashing. I haven't really talked much about the Soviet Union, but I talked about the Popular Front. I talked about socialism, communism, and the Spanish Civil War is seen as a kind of trial run, right? So socialist presidents, and there's a Popular Front in Spain too, right? So there's an American Popular Front. There's a different thing called the Popular Front in Spain. They're elected, popular election in 1936, I think. They're overthrown by military leaders who want to install a military dictatorship. That's the nationalists. So it's the Carlists, the Catholics, the Falangistas, or Spanish fascists. Eventually, they're supported by the Germans in terms of primarily air power. And on the other side is the Republicans. These are the people who were like in power, before they were deposed: socialists, anarchists, Popular Front internationalists. So this would have been Popular Front people from Spain, but also people that supported the Popular Front in Europe, in France, in England. So people of this kind of loose amalgamation of left-leaning groups. I mean, Hemingway went to report on, but also fight in the Spanish Civil War, as did many other kind of Popular Front Americans, and other kind of pro-democracy movements. They lose. The fascists win largely because of, just like Italy was bailed out by Germany in Ethiopia. The Falangistas and the nationalists are bailed out by Germany. They win. Francisco Franco stays in power until 1975. So largely because this is a done deal before World War II starts, you have fascism continues on in Spain for decades after. Again, right, the Spanish Civil War is seen as, right, this is why we need to support, right, anti-fascist organizations. This is why we need to support fascist organizations, right? Because the fear is communism, not fascism. And that's what we see in the Spanish Civil War. It's 26 minutes just for the sake of ending it now. I'm going to end it now because this is the kind of pre-war stuff. And then I'll just continue on in a second here with the wartime stuff. I've kind of gone on a little bit longer than I thought I would already. So this is looking to be a hefty boy of a lecture here. So I'll continue right after this.